Hey everyone, this is Jake. I don't have an interview to publish today, but I did want to put something out there. And so this is just going to be me talking, and we'll get something out next week. I do have a couple on deck, and if you would like to be part of my next round of interviews, then let me know. But here on Intervention TV, we're talking about how to make businesses better. And I think that one of the most critical ideas, and maybe one that's not understood extremely well, is that of psychological safety. So with my colleagues, you're going to hear a lot about this. And I think that it's good to hear a lot about it because it's very, very critical. It's very important. One of the things that it does, well, let's talk about what it is first. And then we'll talk about maybe uh, how we talk about it and then how to implement it. But the idea of psychological safety, when you hear the phrase, a lot of people's go-to is that sounds like a safe space, right? But in fact, it's more like the opposite of a safe space because in a safe space, everyone is immune from offense, right? I'm not going to hear anything in a safe space that might possibly offend me. Well, in this kind of an environment, in a psychological safety environment, I intend to hear things that will offend me, and I intend to react to them appropriately. Now, what do I mean by offense? That's a great question because a lot of times we think of that like somebody insulted me or somebody, said something derogatory about, whatever. That's not what we're talking about at all. This is a business environment. We're talking about business conversations and we're talking about very useful business conversations. And so, something to keep in mind is that if I can never be criticized, then I can never learn. The idea of psychological safety is that I intentionally open up this arena so that people can speak their minds. Have you ever been in this situation where you know exactly why a project went late or you know exactly why a policy isn't working, but you can't say anything because it will upset someone? See, this is the root of offense, is that I have staked my self-worth, in some ways even my identity, on some external thing. And when I do that, I open myself up to emotional weakness. And we do this all the time, though. Think about politics, think about sports teams, think about fandoms, right? When somebody criticizes this thing that's really important to me and I can't hear it, this is what's happening. I have staked in some ways my self-worth or my identity on this thing, and now it becomes important to me to be able to hear criticism of it, even though it might be offensive to me. Right? If I have put together a a process in my business and I think that it's great and I think that it works and I'm really excited about it, and when I present it in front of people, they all criticize it, I'm going to feel bad. Okay. But if I have institutional power and I am particularly immature, we've all met these people, then I might I might manifest that offense by humiliating or punishing, uh, failing to promote people who criticized me, right? And this kind of a thing creates an environment where people do not want to participate. They don't want to tell you the truth that they know because that's going to come back and hurt them. This is the critical aspect of psychological safety. This idea that everyone present is willing to hear ideas that they may not like or agree with or that they might find offensive, but they will hear the ideas because the business itself, the organization, benefits from it. Maybe the next project is going to go smoother because of what we talk about here. Maybe I'm able to revise my policy in a way that makes a lot more sense and becomes more effective because of what I hear in this psychologically safe environment. So it's not about a safe space, right? And I've made that point. This is about putting yourself in an environment where offensive, or let's say it's something different. Let's say risky, because I think that's the term that Amy Edmondson uses. Let's say risky speech. Okay, if I'm going to criticize my boss, that's risky. And so the whole idea here then is that I can criticize my boss. I can put myself at risk without facing any kind of punishment for it. And that's powerful because that unlocks the wisdom of the masses. That unlocks the kinds of intelligence that come from a collaborative environment. Without that kind of psychological safety, that promise that you can speak freely and you won't face any negative ramifications for it, you don't have full participation of your workforce, and that means you can't maximize buy-in, and you can't get a whole picture that might emerge if you were able to talk to everybody and get them talking frankly. Okay, so this is a good thing, but it's also kind of a clunky thing, right? And if I say psychological safety, that's a lot of syllables, and that's coming from the research side of organization development. What do we call that on the practitioner side? So again, it's easy to conflate psychological safety with safe spaces, even though it doesn't mean nearly the same thing. I think that there's a couple of words that we could use, and I think maybe the best one, referencing Amy Edmondson again, but her book is The Fearless Organization, and it's called that because the idea being that people in this organization would be able to freely speak their minds, be able to discuss what they know to be true in environments, speaking at risk. Take away the fear, and that becomes the environment where people can be open and honest. So if we as practitioners then start talking in terms of, hey, we're going to create a fearless environment, right? Or we're going to create a culture of fearlessness. Maybe that makes more sense to people. Maybe people are able to understand that a little bit better than they would otherwise. Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about how we achieve psychological safety or a fearless environment. You can imagine walking into a meeting and there's your boss's boss, and their boss as well, right? You have a number of layers in this hierarchy, and you're supposed to speak freely. Are you willing to do that? Probably not. So in this case, one of the things that needs to happen is that somebody in the upper echelons of the organization would have to come up front and admit that they did something wrong first. And this creates an environment where I can see that they're not afraid to be wrong, right? I can see that people with power are not afraid to ask for input up front and admit that they did something, they made a mistake right up front. Creating that is vulnerable, right? As a boss, maybe you aren't real excited about putting yourself in that position, but it generates trust so effectively that it is highly recommended to everybody that you do this kind of a thing. We have research and case studies going back for decades showing that when leaders are able to come up front and be vulnerable and admit their mistakes and ask for input right up front, that cascades through the whole organization, or at least it cascades through the present meeting. Okay, so that's exciting. That's something that we want. But one of the things about psychological safety is that it isn't necessarily natural. As human beings, we've been organizing ourselves into hierarchies with various degrees of power distance for as long as we've been recording history. Okay, I can't walk into Ugarit and criticize the king. They'd throw me in prison and call me a mad person, which I am, but that's okay. I just say mad person instead of madman. I'm a man. I can say madman. Right? And so it makes a lot of sense that in any meeting, I'm going to expect some kind of power distance that might influence how I'm able to speak or how I'm willing to speak. And we have to keep this in mind as we move forward. It's not necessarily natural. And I'm saying that even though, well, I'm saying that because the tendency for humans is to create hierarchies with high power distance that punish the lower classes. I'm still thinking about you right here. For daring to, criticize the aristocracy. Okay. That's not, obviously in the modern business sense, that's not the same environment that we have, but we do have the echoes of that same environment. So my point is that in order to combat something like that, I think that quite often with these cultural ideas. We're way too prone to say, let's set it up, let's talk about it once, let's describe what a good idea it is, and then let's just let it grow naturally on its own. And the fact is that it does not grow naturally on its own. The fact is that it fizzles and dies if you don't keep feeding it and watering it. And how do you do that? My assertion is that you have to continually reaffirm its value and reassert the norms that you're trying to create. So if you come to the next meeting after the boss has gotten up and been vulnerable and we discussed this and we had a really good conversation and everybody felt comfortable, that doesn't mean the next meeting is going to be as comfortable. Okay? The expectation probably is that the next meeting is going to feel like any other meeting. Unless, again, we get up, we reaffirm that psychological safety. We talk about it overtly and openly and often. We say, here are the benefits. This is why we're doing it. This is what we want out of everybody. This is my commitment to you. And now this is your commitment to me. And as a group, we have a commitment to the whole organization. As we do this, we have a better opportunity to create a fearless culture, a fearless environment. So I hope that this helps people understand the idea of psychological safety, maybe how to talk about it in a practitioner place, in a business setting, in a way that it doesn't involve as many syllables. I shouldn't say syllables because lots of words are long, but that technical sounding jargon. And also how to establish it in the first place and then to perpetuate it once we have that in place. All right, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm sure I'll have plenty more to say about psychological safety, and I know that several of the upcoming interviews that we'll do will also deal with this topic. So I'm excited to get into it because there's a lot here, and it's a very exciting topic. That's all. I'm Jake. This is Intervention TV, and I appreciate you watching. Have a great day.